Chapter 1: The Dinosaur Emergence. It was supposed to be just another normal Tuesday, well, at least that's what we thought. The sky was blue, people were going about their business, and the usual hum of the city filled the air. Then, as if some higher power decided to throw in a curveball just for fun, the ground began to shake. At first, people assumed it was a minor earthquake. "Not again," mumbled Greg, a city worker who had grown far too accustomed to small tremors. He continued sipping his coffee, half watching the streetlight sway in a way that felt all too familiar. Earthquake drills again. How fun! But then the shaking intensified. The buildings creaked and groaned, as though they, too, were questioning what was happening. A few cars jerked to a halt, and the street lamps flickered. The shaking was getting stronger, and before anyone could fully process it, the ground split open with a sound that could only be described as a mix between a roar and a deep, earth-shaking belch. And then, it happened. A gigantic, scaly head emerged from the crack in the earth. Eyes the size of dinner plates blinked at the crowd below. Its mouth opened, revealing teeth that could probably chop a tree in half without breaking a sweat. "Is that a dinosaur?" someone whispered. It was a valid question, but it was the kind of question that felt almost absurd. Dinosaurs, of course, had been gone for over 65 million years, but here it was one standing right in front of them. And to make things even more surreal, it wasn't just any dinosaur, it was a T-Rex. The big one. The one they always told you to stay away from in the documentaries. People stood frozen. Some were gaping in shock, others were frantically pulling out their phones to capture what might be the most ridiculous thing they'd ever seen. Meanwhile, a man in the front row, who appeared to be in the process of evacuating his lunch, whispered, "I really need to stop watching those Jurassic Park movies before bed." The T-Rex, seemingly just as confused as everyone else, tilted its massive head and sniffed the air. It let out a soft huff, like it was trying to figure out if it had accidentally walked into the wrong time period. Then, with a loud, ground-shaking roar, it let everyone know that, yes, it was definitely lost. "Well, this is new," said Claire, a barista who had just come out of her coffee shop for a smoke break. She glanced around at the chaos. "This is, way worse than when the Wi-Fi went down last week." As the dinosaur stumbled forward, trying to regain its balance in this strange, modern world, people began running in all directions. Some took cover behind cars, others simply screamed and pointed. The T-Rex seemed more curious than menacing, at least for now, swaying its giant tail back and forth in a way that sent pedestrians diving for cover like it was a hurricane. Greg, still holding his coffee, muttered, "I always thought we'd make it into the future with flying cars. But I guess having a dinosaur for a neighbor is fine, too." And then, the inevitable happened. The first person to make contact with the T-Rex was a pigeon. A very angry pigeon that, apparently, had decided it didn't like the way the giant reptile was taking up space. The pigeon, who had absolutely no sense of self-preservation, began dive-bombing the T-Rex's face in what can only be described as a hilarious attempt to defend its turf. The T-Rex blinked, unsure of what to do with this tiny, feathered annoyance. And in true fashion, the bird quickly regretted its decision as the T-Rex snorted and swiped its giant tail through the air, sending the pigeon flying dramatically into a nearby billboard. "Okay, well, I think the bird just declared war," Claire said, holding her hands up as if in surrender. The dinosaur, clearly a little frustrated by the small creature, now turned its attention toward the rest of the crowd. It began lumbering in their direction, one heavy footstep after another. People screamed and scattered, but the T-Rex was oddly methodical, like a confused tourist trying to figure out how to navigate the city. It looked at a street sign, then at a parked car, then at a vending machine. It sniffed the air again. It was as if it was thinking, "What kind of place have I just stumbled into?" A few people cautiously approached the creature, unsure of whether it was safe or not. Some people were filming, others were cautiously attempting to pet it, because, let's be honest, people don't always think things through. "Okay, this is insane," Greg finally said, still standing in the middle of the street, sipping his coffee. "But on the bright side, maybe this will finally get me out of the office. I mean, how many times do you get to say, 'I was there when the dinosaur showed up'?" And just like that, the city was forever changed. A creature from the past had entered the present, and no one, not even the T-Rex itself, was sure what would come next. Chapter 2: Attempts to Control. After the initial shock wore off, the realization set in, the T-Rex wasn't going anywhere. In fact, it seemed to be getting more comfortable by the second, like a houseguest who had overstayed their welcome but refused to leave. The authorities, who had initially believed this was some kind of elaborate prank or perhaps a very poorly executed viral marketing campaign, quickly realized they had a real problem on their hands. The first attempt at control came from the government, which, in all its infinite wisdom, thought it would be a brilliant idea to negotiate with a prehistoric predator. A press conference was hastily scheduled. The president stood at a podium, flanked by a handful of military advisors who were desperately trying to hide their confusion behind stern faces. Ladies and gentlemen, the president began, we are working with experts to find peaceful solutions for integrating the T-Rex into society. We are hopeful that. But just as the words left his mouth, a loud thud was heard in the background. Everyone turned to see the T-Rex, with its massive tail, had knocked over a hot dog cart, sending hot dogs flying in all directions. Peaceful solutions, the president mumbled, his face turning a shade of red that only someone who had just been seriously embarrassed could understand. Across the street, a group of scientists was already working on a plan to capture the beast. It's simple, Dr. Henderson, a paleontologist, said confidently to his colleagues as they all stood around a large map, marking various locations with glowing pins. We'll use a combination of tranquilizers, modern technology, and giant nets. He paused, glancing at the giant T-Rex, who was now attempting to figure out how to use a public bench as a scratching post. Giant nets? Really? One of the assistants asked, eyebrows raised. Isn't that a little old school? Look, Dr. Henderson sighed, rubbing his temples. It's either that or ask it nicely to go back to the Jurassic period. We don't have time for fancy solutions. The first attempt at capturing the T-Rex involved a team of scientists armed with tranquilizer darts. They had carefully calculated the correct dosage based on weight, metabolism, and species, except for one minor detail. No one had bothered to check if the T-Rex was actually immune to tranquilizers. The dart team approached cautiously. One scientist, wearing what could only be described as the world's most impractical helmet, aimed the dart at the T-Rex's neck and fired. The dart hit with a soft thwack, but the T-Rex, who had been watching a pigeon fly overhead, barely noticed. It took a few steps forward, then turned around, giving the scientists a look that seemed to say, "Really? This is the best you've got? Oh, it's gonna be one of those days," Dr. Henderson muttered as the T-Rex casually swiped the dart out of its neck with a claw. While the military scrambled to deploy larger, more advanced measures, people began to realize that trying to control a dinosaur with modern technology might be more difficult than expected. One military strategist, Colonel Simmons, decided that perhaps the best way to handle the T-Rex was to outsmart it. "We'll use food," he said with confidence, rubbing his hands together like a villain in a cartoon. "Let's lure it into a containment zone. It's a dinosaur, it's probably hungry." But the military's plan to bait the creature with a giant steak had, well, let's just say, interesting consequences. The T-Rex, clearly not impressed by the choice of cuisine, decided instead to stomp all over the steak in a display of pure animal frustration. "Great, now it's mad," Simmons groaned, staring at the flattened steak and wondering why he didn't just stick to traditional strategies, like containment or airstrikes. The public, meanwhile, was less than impressed with these so-called attempts at control. Social media, which had become a bizarre combination of chaos and humor in the wake of the T-Rex's appearance, was flooded with memes. People started using the hashtag Tyrannosaurus Troubles, joking that the government's next plan would involve giving the T-Rex a smartphone and hoping it would swipe left on their problems. "Maybe we should just offer it a Netflix subscription," one tweet read. "A few documentaries on how to not destroy a city might do the trick." But not everyone found the situation amusing. Some groups, particularly environmentalists, argued that the T-Rex had as much right to exist in the present day as any other animal. "We're the ones who are out of place, not the dinosaur," one spokesperson declared from a protest that was being live-streamed across the globe. "We've destroyed its habitat for millions of years, and now we want to control it? No way." Amidst all the confusion, a small but growing movement began to take shape, the T-Rex Liberation Front. These individuals believed that the dinosaur deserved freedom, and that humanity should learn to coexist with the creature rather than trying to subdue it. They took to the streets wearing homemade dinosaur rights shirts and carrying signs that read, "Stop the cages, let the T-Rex roam." And just when things couldn't get more absurd, the T-Rex, now quite used to the attention, paused and turned its giant head toward the crowd. It let out a deep, low growl, as if to say, "You guys are ridiculous." In the end, the government had no choice but to admit that maybe, just maybe, they were out of their league on this one. "Well, this is going well," Dr. Henderson remarked, standing in front of a large screen displaying the T-Rex's latest move. "Anyone up for a drink?" Chapter 3. Social and Economic Changes. It didn't take long before people realized that a T-Rex roaming the streets wasn't just a brief moment of chaos, it was the new normal. And when things settle into normalcy, society tends to do what it does best, adapt. First came the tourism boom. You'd think that having a giant, prehistoric predator roaming the city streets would be a bad thing for the local economy, but you'd be wrong. Turns out, people love a good spectacle. People from around the world flocked to cities like New York and London, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mighty creature. Hotels, once known for their plush pillows and top-notch service, now boasted T-Rex view rooms, where guests could pay extra for the exclusive experience of watching the dinosaur struggle to navigate narrow alleys and occasionally knock over street signs. "Oh, this is incredible," one tourist said, holding up a selfie stick as the T-Rex accidentally stepped on a bus. "This is even better than Disneyland." The local economy wasn't the only thing booming. Merchandising took off in ways no one could have predicted. Shops now sold dinosaur survival kits, complete with everything you might need to stay safe in a world where the laws of nature were a little wobbly. There were t-shirts with T-Rex? More like T, yes, printed on them, and a line of coffee mugs that said, "Don't mess with me, I survived the T-Rex apocalypse." A few enterprising individuals even started offering T-Rex tours. These weren't the standard tours where you'd get into a van and look at local landmarks. No, these were dinosaur-focused adventures. Groups would be led on a walking tour of the city, with professional guides who provided real-time updates on where the T-Rex was last spotted. So, folks, if you look to your right, you'll see the mighty beast having a standoff with a traffic light. I recommend snapping a quick picture. This is the first time we've seen a dinosaur this close to public infrastructure since, well, ever. But it wasn't just tourism and merchandising that were affected. The real estate market had a field day as well. The T-Rex, as it turned out, didn't have much regard for city planning, which led to some interesting new living arrangements. After a particularly dramatic tail swipe destroyed several luxury apartment buildings, landlords decided to rethink their properties' locations. One group of investors even started marketing dinosaur-adjacent real estate properties located just outside the city's main T-Rex zone, perfect for people who wanted the thrill of danger without the actual risk of being eaten. "We can't offer you dinosaurs in your backyard," one ad said, "but we can offer you the next best thing, a view of the T-Rex's path of destruction for only $1,200 per month." However, the most significant economic shift happened in the workforce. As you can imagine, having a giant carnivore in the neighborhood made certain normal jobs a little tricky. Postmen could no longer walk around delivering letters. Not because they didn't want to, but because their daily routes now included dodging a 50-foot-tall dinosaur with a bad attitude. "Sorry, Mrs. Peterson," said one mailman, who had recently gotten really good at jumping into trees, "I tried to deliver your package, but the T-Rex knocked over my cart and ate my rod for lunch. You'll get it next week, maybe." Meanwhile, the security industry went through a bit of an existential crisis. When your job involves keeping the peace and maintaining order, but you're facing a T-Rex who could flatten an entire block with the flick of its tail, things get a little complicated. "Let's be real," said Rick, a former security guard who had switched careers after being outsmarted by the T-Rex's tail. "I mean, how am I supposed to stop that thing from eating my patrol car? It's like trying to stop a freight train with a feather duster." However, there was a bright side. With all the new industries emerging, everything from dinosaur-themed escape rooms to underground T-Rex fighting leagues, which were, unfortunately, not legal, people found new opportunities to adapt and thrive. In fact, the rise of dinosaur-powered entertainment became the highlight of modern pop culture. Forget Netflix, now it was all about the T-Rex challenge. You could pay to enter an arena and try to outwit a baby T-Rex, a less dangerous version of the original. The goal? To dodge its attacks long enough to collect a token from the T-Rex prize box without getting eaten. The game became an overnight sensation. "It's like Survivor," one contestant said, "but with real survival tactics." And while some people were making money hand over fist, others were seeing their businesses suffer. Traffic control companies, for instance, had never been so busy. Local authorities introduced a new skyline parking system, which involved floating above the ground in hover pods to avoid the T-Rex's path of destruction. At the same time, public health officials were working overtime to ensure that people weren't overexposed to the dangers of living in a dinosaur-heavy environment. "Stay indoors during peak T-Rex hours," one health advisor said in a public service announcement, "and always carry a T-Rex emergency whistle just in case you need to make a quick escape." Despite all the disruption, a curious thing started happening. People began to view the T-Rex not as a threat, but as part of the landscape. It was just another bizarre addition to the fabric of modern life, like Wi-Fi outages and people trying to figure out how to actually use cryptocurrency. "I mean, yeah," Claire said, scrolling through her phone as the T-Rex roared in the background, "it's a little wild, but at least I don't have to deal with rush hour traffic anymore."